Learning from Leaders conference of the season. This year is quite special for EU Business School, as we will be celebrating our 50 years anniversary. That means that we will have a mix of different events. Some of our Learning from Leaders will be digital, and some others will be on site. Starting with this one, and we will have two more, one on November 14th in Barcelona, and one other one in Geneva on November 23rd, followed by Munich in February 2024. But let's come back to today. Today we're thrilled to welcome Mr. Børge Brende, the President of the World Economic Forum. Mr. Brende, on behalf of the entire EU Business School community, I'd like to thank you for having accepted our invitation. Your presence to the Learning of Leaders events will enrich the student experience and our faculty experience as well. They will gain insights from your extensive knowledge and experience in the global business landscape. And we are confident that your presence will be a source of inspiration and knowledge for all the attendees. Welcome, Mr. Brende. I am now leaving the floor to the one and only Peter Van Am, who has masterly hosted the Learning from Leaders for the last 4 seasons. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luc, and welcome everyone. It's so great to see all of you again for the first time this year. We have done this series, Børge, for the last 3 years as a virtual learning series, and we started it during COVID, which when both of us were, of course, at the World Economic Forum, trying to connect world leaders virtually, but of course also students have to learn and connect with each other, and so that's what the origin of this speaker series is. So thank you so much for joining us. It's special to see you in person, I think for all of us, for me too, of course, because COVID has disappeared as a threat to our health or to travel. You've been traveling the world, I think. Where have you been the last couple of months?
Oh, last couple of months, that's a difficult one. Firstly, thank you for the warm welcome. Great to be here, and good to see you, Peter. We used to see each other almost every day, so that's a change. So I just came back from London, and before that I was in DC, and then Saudi Arabia. That's the last 2 weeks.
The last 2 weeks.
But if you asked for the last 2 months, I really don't remember, but it includes India and China.
But you are based in Geneva.
The new champions. The new G2 and maybe 4.
Yeah. When you've been traveling in the last couple of weeks, of course, terrible events have been unfolding in the Middle East. You're a diplomat, in addition to being the president of the World Economic Forum. Understanding that this is very emotional for many people, what's going on. Can you help make sense what is happening on a geopolitical level and what's at stake for the world community?
A lot is at stake. To make sense of it, I think, is harder. But it is a reality what is now unfolding. I vividly remember 2014 when we had the last Gaza war, and together with then the presidency of Egypt, Norway, when I was foreign minister, were in charge of the donor conference for rebuilding Gaza after the war. So now, almost 10 years later, I guess there will be a donor conference in a year's time where one has to rebuild again. But you're also right, Peter, that the emotions that we see now is probably some of the strongest emotions in any conflict, and it's a lot of black and white, and this also makes it harder to find solutions to this conflict, and I think we're seeing this every day.
Out right now.
Maybe I'll do something with my mic. Is it better now?
Yeah, can we all hear Børge? Because Børge, of course, you've had already a long and established career, including as mediator, as peace mediator. You have actually led the peace process, or let's say enabled, supported the peace process between Colombia, the government, and the FARC rebels. I believe that was together with Cuba. Could you tell us what were some of the techniques that you used in such a violent conflict that was, at its scale and its region, terrible for the people there? Some of the techniques that you found worked to bring these parties together. What can you do? What have you done at that time?
So, if you are an interlocutor in such a conflict, you can try to find solutions with the parties, but you can only bring the horses to the well. You cannot force them to drink the water. And I think now with the situation between Hamas and Israel, with the Palestinian situation, there is no, at this moment, no willingness to address the underlying real challenges, being a two-state solution. In the future, there is no, of course, a feeling in Israel for revenge related to what happened at the kibbutz, and also the civilians killed, and also the hostages. Then there is no reaction in Gaza among Palestinians and many Arab countries that they feel Israel is overall responsible for this because of a lack of a political dialogue and establishment of a two-state solution. And no, the response from Israel in Gaza is then also creating another situation related to the humanitarian situation there. So there is no a war, but hopefully, even after, hopefully it will not escalate further in the region, because that's always a risk, and then you will easily have Lebanon drawn in, Syria, Iraq, and the whole Gulf could possibly also be drawn in. But after, if it doesn't escalate further, and if there is a way of getting a truce, then I think everyone understands that, and I hope so at least, this cannot continue. There needs to be a breaking of the impasse from the past, and we cannot see this happening again and again. So what I'm trying to say is that the tools we used in Colombia in the conflict between the FARC guerrilla that had lost and the Colombian government that had lasted for more than 50 years and killed around and wounded more than 200,000 people. There was then a willingness from both of the parties, from President Santos, but also the leader of the FARC guerrilla, to come together and try to find solutions. There were situations where they walked away from each other, big drama. It was the end of the it was the end of the negotiations and all this. But I still felt there was a willingness. No, in the Gaza situation, that's definitely not right. I think we all know most. We are very worried about the humanitarian consequences. We're very worried also about the escalation.
When you have been a mediator, what have you found to be, how can you assume that role? How can a third party be accepted to mediate between conflicting parties? And how's that been for you as a Norwegian at the time, I suppose, foreign minister, to take on that role?
Yeah, so also Norway have had traditionally a role between the Israelis and the Palestinians. We are still heading this AHLC, it's Ad Hoc Liaison Committee. It's the longest ongoing Ad Hoc Liaison Committee ever, established in '92 during the Oslo process. Course, yeah. And it's like it's a committee that looks at it's a donor committee really for the Palestinians. So if you come back to the Colombia, why was Norway in the mix there? I think Norway had done the work on the Oslo process. Norway had also tried in Sri Lanka, not so successful, to put it mildly. And we were also involved in some other peace and reconciliation processes. And then I think each of the parties had to choose someone they trusted, and the others would accept. Colombia chose, FARC chose Cuba
yeah.
as a guarantor. I don't think that was the first country on the priority list of President Santos.
Right.
But they accepted. And then the Colombian government had also to choose a government. I think one of the reasons they chose the Norwegians were really that we had no really stake in the region. You couldn't pick a large country that had very big interests. And then they knew that we had also some very good negotiators from before, and we knew also about how should a modern peace and reconciliation process be run. And there's so many legal questions also on transitional justice. So you needed really good lawyers also in international law to be part of it.
So of course there's a figurehead, there's a main person. You, of course, being the foreign minister, I suppose at the time, was one of the key people who would literally sit people at a table and have them speak to each other. But then you had a back room with lawyers who were working on, like, do we put that into technicalities? Is that how it worked?
Sort of, but everything is much more complicated in life than it seems from the outset. I would say the ones that were driving the negotiations were a group of civil servants on the Norwegian side, where we had also a head of the negotiations.
Yeah,
his name was Dag and Nylander. He was an experienced Norwegian civil servant, a lawyer, and also a Spanish speaker.
Okay, yeah.
That is
crucial,
critical,
of course.
Critical, because the English.
So we should
knowledge,
continue now in Spanish then.
Yeah. Muchas gracias. That's fine. But it's so that team were doing the negotiations.
Groundwork,
No, and they negotiated with then. So the lead negotiators were from the Colombian government and from the FARC government.
Okay.
So they were facilitators of the process. And then Cuba kind of were there also. So when there was a problem between FARC guerrilla and the Colombian government, these teams came in and tried to say, oh, why don't you look into that? Why isn't that a possibility to find such a solution? And when it got really bad,
that's
the
when you had to
team
fly
called me, or they called the Cuban foreign minister, Bruno, and then we maybe came in and tried to then...
So you were more like the bad cop in the good cop, bad cop situation?
Or, yeah, I wouldn't say maybe good cop, bad cop. I'm not so sure. I think we were more they knew it was like really serious, because then I think the reality was that with the FARC, I think Cuba had leverage.
Right.
And Venezuela had leverage. But Cuba had also leverage with Venezuela. So they could nudge FARC if they were going down a rabbit hole. And we could also nudge, the Norwegians could also nudge the Colombian government if they were going down their rabbit holes. But, these things took 6 years.
Yeah,
so
incredible.
we got to know each other pretty well. So it wasn't, after some time, there were also relationships established, and there was trust. And we could also, of course, push FARC, and Cuba can also speak to the Colombian government. But it's really, really fascinating. I remember first time No Norwegian foreign minister had ever been to Cuba before. After the
after the
revolution, but not
crisis.
before that either. So I remember the first time I came to Cuba as a first Norwegian foreign minister. People were like, some people complained in Norway, our foreign minister shouldn't visit, blah 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 blah, and you can just they had their reasons for not visiting. But then when I came, and it was in the outset of it was in a suburban area of Havana.
Havana, yeah.
And I felt like I was in like a film from the 1950s, black and white, based on a like Latin American book, either of Allende or Vargas Llosa or something like that. And it was really quite surreal that these guys that had been in the jungle as a guerrilla for 50 years were sitting there with the foreign minister of Colombia, with the vice president, and in the beginning, I tell you, the temperature was really high. You have heard about, you should not believe in stereotypes, but we heard about Latino temperature and all this. But I tell you, it was not a Sunday school.
Wow.
And even if my Spanish knowledge is limited, I do know a lot of strong Spanish language after that. That's for sure. But it had to go. They had to vent. They have seen civilians killed on the Colombian government side, soldiers. But there was also a lot of victims, of course, on the FARC side. And what we did, though, that was like really something that made a huge impression. We brought the victims to Cuba. So the negotiators had to meet with the victims on both sides.
Wow.
Families of the military or someone that were wounded by FARC guerrilla. And then a lot of people in the rural areas that also were wounded or victims of the government army. It was really, really striking. But the most difficult part for me was really this whole thing about transitional justice. And this is also for you as students. How do you, if you have had a conflict for 50 years,
right?
And if someone has done something terrible,
normally you would go to jail for the rest of your life, but in this case, often there had to be a different solution.
Yeah, so they could then be in house arrest for a year or two, and etc., where you normally would have to go. But you will not have an army putting themselves into prison, and you will not have a guerrilla accepting to go in prison for 20, 30 years. But there are also some rules in international law, and Norway could not be part of a process not complying with international law. So we had always, when we negotiated, we had always someone angry from Oslo calling us and said, just don't even try, because this is not according to international law. Boom! And the phone was like, Then
you had to deal with
one time, one of them said, hey, do you know that the foreign minister is also in the room? Yeah, and the person said, yeah. But the foreign minister also has to comply with international law. Bam! And that's true. They're doing their job. But it was tough. It was really tough to find solutions that both parties can accept, had the legitimacy, and still according to international law. Because we can, of course, you cannot kill someone without having any kind of consequences. But, of course, they thought it was part of a guerrilla warfare or a war against the guerrilla, and
and then the means were, in their eyes, justified.
Yeah.
But of course, at the end, you have to find a resolution. That ended well because the peace still stands in Colombia.
I think so, partly.
Yeah.
No, it does. No. You have to. The basic principles do stand. I have to say.
Now, I think we could have a conversation with you until midnight to talk about everything you've done, in your career. But one of the other major things that you've done that's maybe also relevant for today is that you have been the president of the Norwegian Red Cross.
Secretary General.
Oh yeah, sure, Secretary General. We have to use the right
There's one
terminology.
president and there's one Secretary General.
Okay, so politically we have to make sure we use the
Of
right
course,
terminology.
we are precise.
And I think that as foreign minister, you also doubled humanitarian aid of Norway to other countries. So in other words, you've played a major role not just in peace, but also in humanitarian efforts. What has been the lesson from that for you? We've seen the Red Cross play its role. It's been increasingly difficult in many situations. They are often in harm's way themselves. And of course, humanitarian aid, is also being questioned and also sometimes ineffective. What has been the takeaway for you? How is it helpful?
So we had this joke in Norway that it was a prerequisite for becoming foreign minister to have been Secretary General of Norwegian Red Cross. Because we had several foreign ministers that had that job. It wasn't the reason why I took on the job, though, to become...
But it actually, you kept the joke active. Because afterwards you became foreign minister.
Yeah. But it's, with students and we have to have, with all those crises too, we have to have a little bit of a lighter touch once in a while, because it's a very serious thing about the humanitarian organizations and situations. So, I think for me it's also a privilege of a lifetime to have worked. Both for the Red Cross, but also to have been a foreign minister. When it comes to the Red Cross and the Red Crescent too,
it's based here just a few hundred meters up the road.
IFRC is here. That's the federation, and then you have the ICRC, as you know, with a little bit different mandate, but they're both there. IFRC being the umbrella organization for all the national societies of the Red Cross, and the ICRC with their own mandate, as you know, as a Swiss international organization. So I would say that the humanitarian organizations have a critical role in a polarized, fragmented world. These organizations are able to talk to all, including all parties included, and they're not activist organization on the political side. So they don't take a political stand, but they have the humanitarian principles that they comply with. So that's why ICRC now were in Gaza, and they were the ones bringing the hostages over to Israel. So that house, for example, that ICRC is having in Gaza is a house I stayed several times when I was Secretary General of Norwegian Red Cross, and it is we were able to have operations both in Gaza at the time, but also in the West Bank, and with also collaboration with the Israeli Red Cross. It's not really a Red Cross. It's David Magon. David Magon, I think it's the name of it. So that's a special national society with their own emblem, but it's part of the international federation. So being part of the Red Cross and I was there for the relief operations in Haiti, with the flooding in Pakistan. I think it shows you that humanitarian assistance that is neutral and impartial have a critical role. The problem is that many of these humanitarian crises are they are going on and on for decades. So when do they move from being humanitarian crisis to being really the development crisis, where you have to work with ODA and more traditional development assistance? But no, the need for humanitarian assistance is unbelievable, because we have the crisis now in Gaza, of course, but you have it in Somalia, you have it in Sudan with the ongoing war. The need is much bigger than the money available. And countries are also indebted. The traditional donor countries are indebted, so they're cutting their assistance, not only on the traditional development assistance, but also on the humanitarian side.
Is that something that you would recommend anyone in this room to do, is to sort of support a humanitarian organization in times of crisis?
Of course.
Yeah.
I think we all reflect on how can we contribute, but I think there are people that can contribute more than students than on student loans, you know. That there are people that don't have student loan anymore, but many students also can do work that is voluntary work. That's also something that is incredibly important.
You know, I want to make sure that later on we have some time for questions from the floor. So if you have something you would like to ask, you know, start thinking about it. Before we get to that, Børge, you know, maybe just a little bit about what you do today. Because we've talked now, you know, for 20 minutes about your work in the past, at the Red Cross, you know, foreign minister. But today you are the president of the World Economic Forum.
No, I'm the president.
I know very well that you are the president of the World Economic Forum, of course. What are you doing today, individually, but as an organization, to drive forward the mission? The mission of the organization is to improve the state of the world. What are the pain points? What are the most important initiatives that you're focused on today?
So, I think you could have been answering this question as well as me, Peter, but I'll do it my way. I'll do it my way.
Until a year ago, I was working on the communications side of the equation.
And very well, and wrote op-eds and all that. So, World Economic Forum is an international organization under Swiss law.
Like the Red Cross?
Yeah, like ICRC. So the mission of the forum is that we're trying to get the leading companies of the world. We have 850 of them. Most of them are Fortune 1000 companies. We're trying to mobilize them to form coalitions and also be part of groups that push the envelope in different areas. And the power of the private sector should not be underestimated. Around 70% of the global GDP is in the private sector, and 30% in the governmental sector.
And of course, we're in a group here of business school students, so they're happy to hear that their work will not be in vain.
Well, and of course, there are some people arguing that the business of business is business. And there are those also arguing that business also have to take a broader responsibility. You have to take a broader responsibility about the local community you operate in. You have a responsibility for your employees. You also have, of course, you have a responsibility towards your stockholders too, and owners. I'm not saying that. But you also have to take a broader responsibility in the country and the world you're operating. So what we're trying to do is to combine business interests with also then committing to things that can make positive impact on society. So let's be like concrete, because this is a bit maybe up there. So I can share some of the initiatives that I'm passionate about, but you know, we have 120 different initiatives. I don't think we have time to walk through some of them. But I can tell you something that I was part of all the way from the beginning, and I'm still part of it personally. So in the run-up to Glasgow COP,
the climate conference in Glasgow 2 years ago.
COP 26. Or was COP 26, because now it's 27 and then 28.
Egypt
you have to Sharm Sheikh in between. You have to get the numbers right. So we were thinking, what are the gaps or deltas when it comes to engaging business when it comes to climate change
action, yeah.
and energy transition. So then Secretary John Kerry and I have worked together before on ocean when he was Secretary of State and I was in Norway, and we came together and we had dinner, and then we said, why don't we get the big companies of the world to use their purchasing power to create a green demand where there is no green demand today?
New technologies that cannot come to the market today unless there is significant demand from business.
That's one way of saying it, yes. So no, but it's true, because the technology, sometimes you need the technologies, sometimes the technology is there, but it's not it's not used because it's too expensive. So then with that initiative, we got the Apples, the Amazons of the world to commit. So, for example, Apple said, we persuaded them to be a part, Tim Cook, and then we said, why don't you say that 25% of the aluminium you're buying in the future needs to be green? And if Apple says to all the aluminium producers in the world, if you want to be part of our tender, 25% of your aluminium has to be green. Then you create a demand for green aluminium produced on renewables that were not there before. You have to pay maybe a little bit more, but Apple was willing to do that and at least create that demand.
To make its beautiful marketing video that we've now seen. Have you seen
that? I saw that. That has been questioned by the European European Commission.
But is it? I mean, it's an amazing idea, and we've seen it work. You've given the example. I mean, is it really that you then just WhatsApp John Kerry or Tim Cook and say, "Shall we do this?" And they write back, "Let's do it." Is that how it works? I mean, how do you?
No, I said it was a dinner with Kerry, though, where it started. But he has a lot of also, he has a persuasive power on some of the American companies.
John Kerry, of course, is climate envoy of the United States government, and so he has that formal authority.
Yeah. And we said to the companies that we're going to launch it in COP 26 with President Biden, and then we had companies then from cement industry, aluminium, steel, transport, aviation, fertilizers. Yeah. So now there are those that buy fertilizers are saying, our fertilizers needs to stick to these and these criteria. If you want to sell, for example, to Cargill or to the big agriculture conglomerate globally. So I think this coalition has created a green demand. Then we have another group, CO climate leaders.
I think I heard from them today. Is that right?
Yes, they put out this letter. Yeah,
a letter.
You're better. You're super.
I try to stay
You're
up to
sitting
date.
at your home office reading everything, huh?
I had to make sure I was prepared for this interview. Of course.
No, I'm glad I saw it myself. No, I was part. No, but I've been seeing the development of the letter. So the CO climate leaders, 120 CEOs and 120 companies, have all committed to go net zero by 2050. Yeah. That's a prerequisite. So it's just not like a club you can join and say, "Oh, I want to be
I want to be green
leaders." You have to commit your company for that, and then you have in all areas, and being upskilling, being for example jobs, being anti-corruption work, being in water, agriculture, trees, nature, biodiversity, you name it, trade. We have 120 different initiatives that companies are part of. So we are, and of course I'm totally objective.
You're
totally objective. We are the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation and Partnerships.
That's great. I can confirm that.
Thank you. You still like us?
I still like you. Of course I do. So you do these initiatives, and you mentioned the climate initiatives. I mean, amazing names, right? I mean, Apple, Microsoft. I think the climate leaders, IKEA is there. Like everyone is in the room. Is that something that makes you hopeful for the future? Because I think that among a lot of the people in the room, there is also a certain anxiety, a certain fear for the future that, I mean, we feel it almost. I mean, how hot was this summer? You know what I mean? The hottest on record, including here in Geneva and many other places. So people might feel like, hey, we're actually losing this battle. Do those initiatives keep you hopeful?
So, this water, the glass is half full or half empty.
Right.
So I can answer it
either
way.
I can fill it up for you. If you like,
yeah, I'm afraid it's not reflecting the reality of the world. But good for you, Peter. There are hopes, and it's still possible to change things. Are we able to change things fast enough?
Question mark.
I think it's a question mark. But if you start then with half full and not half empty. So before Paris, the big climate conference in Paris, I think we were on the way towards a 4 degrees scenario of increased 4 degrees increased global temperature.
That's crazy.
Yeah. After Paris, I think we were like close to 3. 3. After Glasgow, I think there are now 70% of all global companies has taken on, and countries have taken on an obligation in one or another way, at least countries.
Right.
So now we are more on maybe a course for 2.3. But there is, of course, positive to have gone from 4 to 2.3. We should be down to 1.5 that we have agreed. So why? So that we have to be happy about, but
that's the half full.
Yeah, that's
aspect.
the half full. And
I suppose coming from Norway, adding a degree and a half is also a glass half full for you sometimes.
So I think we should not take on the glasses of Norway in this respect. I think we need to have global glasses.
No, for sure. So
but it is a paradox that those nations, some of the nations that are most hit, are those that are least responsible for the CO2 emissions. That's a fact. Not all, but some. Then, what makes me optimistic? If we had met in this room 10 years ago, and I had said, "Oh, the price of solar would fall to 1/10."
Yeah, I would have not believed you.
No. Oh, this blue-eyed Norwegian, he's naive. So that's not going to happen. And no, solar is, without subsidies, competitive with all fossil fuels and cheaper most places in the world. On wind, it fell to 1/7.
Right.
So how do we make sure that we don't stop with this, that we have carbon capture and storage, that we have green hydrogen, that we have fusion, that we have all this necessary energy efficiency, the renewable scaled up at a level where you can move from a fossil fuel-based society. We built an industrial revolution for 200 years on fossil fuels. We built a lot of course, also a lot of prosperity based on
the basis of that.
But to change from a society run one way to a society
entirely a different way,
based on either capturing all the CO2 or other different fuels and not increasing the prices.
Enormous challenge.
Yeah, I think we underestimate what this really means. I think we're all, including myself, sometimes sticking too much to the big words, but the complications here are, it's very complicated, but the most difficult thing is that because of the fragmentation in the world, there is not possible to make agree on what is really needed. And many of you are in business and economics, and as we know, if you don't internalize the externalities related to something that, like polluting is free, you will not change behavior. So this costs now the society more climate change than the action to stop it. So I think if we had agreed on a global CO2 tax or something, you would see that business, they don't like to pay taxes, so then they would also do more to find ways to not pay it by being more effective and maybe applying new technologies. But not even that, on such a fundamental global challenge, are we able to agree.
Right, which is then the glass half empty, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe the last part of the glass half empty is that, of course, there's also a certain amount of cynicism among people that look at this process. I know there's been questions asked, why is now the UAE the host of the next conference of the parties? Why are so many businesses that rely on fossil fuels present in such meetings? Do you then say it's better to take them into the bath and we have to all be in the same boat? Or do you feel like, you do have to call things out? Where do you stand on that?
So if you're going to reach a 1.5 degrees target, that's going to be reached through having the hard-to-abate industry on board. And oil and gas is also hard-to-abate industry. If you just have like the professional services or all that,
it's not going to work.
No. So you need to talk to the aluminium producers, the steel producers,
and the oil and gas companies,
oil and gas, and all this. They need to be in the room and be part of this travel, and they have to deliver on this. For example, methane. At least we could start with having a global agreement that we don't do gas flaring and methane anymore.
Right.
And methane, we know, is 25 times worse than a normal greenhouse like CO2. So I would say that it was also Nixon and Kissinger that can go to Beijing in the early 70s.
I don't think anyone in the room was alive when Nixon and Kissinger were, but they're students of history, of course.
Though. I think they're very well read. I think you still remember Napoleon even if you were not born.
That's right.
So don't underestimate the students.
Yeah, you have to make those kinds of efforts.
I know, I'm just pulling your leg. So, like you were trying with me. So we are friends, as you can understand. But as you know, Kissinger and Nixon could go to China because no one would claim that Nixon or Kissinger was a communist. So what you could say, though, with the UAE being a huge energy producer, they have some of the largest renewables in the world, but they're also a big producer of oil and gas. So should that conference then be in an oil and gas country? I think an oil and gas country can also influence a lot on those businesses, if they want, that have to do the reductions. So you can argue both ways. I think this is the, but it's very emotional. I agree.
No, that's for sure. Now, I mean, I really appreciate this tour d'horizon that we got from you about current and past. I guess I got to ask you, what's the future? I mean, you've been everything, environment minister, trade minister, foreign minister, president of the World Economic Forum, Secretary General of the Red Cross. What's left for you, Børge?
But maybe I'll just stick to the job I have, huh? That's also always an option. No, I know that you're coming also, at least that's what you said in the email, to talk about like leadership principles and advice to young people. So
my question really is, did you know when you were the age of most of the students here, did you know what you wanted to become?
No, that's for sure. But I was interested in economics and geopolitics, I think earlier than most kids.
Of your classmates.
And even earlier maybe than it's good for you. But
what was your first job? I think at one point you told me that, I suppose that was to support me. You said, Peter, one day I was like you. I was also writing speeches. Was that your first job in Parliament?
It was one. No, before I was, I worked as a young journalist in our local newspaper. But that has also a story, because I had a terrible, boring summer job. Since they in Norway, and that maybe shows my age, though, they were not so conscious about child labor back then. So early in
13.
life, I had to work in one of my parents' friend's farm to take up potatoes and all that. Of course, in the fall, from we were 8, 9, but that was just for a few days.
Sure,
so I don't think that was
that counted.
But then after 12, we had to have a summer job, and the summer job I got was working in a company that did like establishing gardens for people.
Oh wow! Okay, well that's something I've done.
It sounds maybe nicer than I felt it was at that time. You know, it was hard work, and I was just very firm on then next summer or the summer after
find
not
another
to do.
job.
So then I had my local school paper that I was editor for, and then I went to the editor in the local newspaper, and I said, I can even work for free, I said, during the summer. So he hired me, not for free though, because I don't think that was the deal. And so I worked a few years in the summers.
And it got you into writing, I suppose.
Yeah, writing. And then when I was a student, I was also in youth politics. And then I was 21. I was hired as first part-time, but then full-time for some time, as the speechwriter of our former prime minister.
That's fantastic.
In the parliament.
It sounds like a really cool. I mean, at least to me, you know how much I like to write speeches.
But then it is hard work, though.
It's hard work. Yes,
and
that's
it's
true.
easier when you're a bit older, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't have had a 21 years old speechwriter.
I guess.
But,
well, if you need an older one, you let me know. I know
you're
one.
hired. You will regret it.
Then, of course, you know, that's the first years of your career. What are you looking for at that point in your life? Are you looking to gain skills? Are you looking for a mentor? Are you looking for a direction in your career? What is it that you most appreciate at that point?
So what I was coming at is that I have never really been doing a lot of planning. So people say, oh, did you plan and did you apply for those jobs? I've been very lucky in the sense that I tried, though. I think I was a very hard worker when I was young.
Yeah, well, I think you're still a hard worker.
Yeah, but I was I was passionate about what I did. I really liked being a speechwriter.
Right.
I thought it was like sitting in the parliament, being 21 years old, having the privilege of writing op-eds, speeches. When I also worked in the local paper, I was so happy not to be out there in the rain doing all the other work I used to do in the summer. So I really worked hard. But for me, it was none of these were jobs. For me,
it was a
when
passion.
it was like I didn't want to leave the local newspaper in the afternoon because I thought it was more fun sitting there writing than doing something else. So I think I really been privileged that I liked what I've been doing.
And then things happen.
Yeah, and then if you like it, I think maybe you're good at it. And then things happen. So then after I have wrote for that freelance as a newspaper when I was a student, I was hired as a speechwriter. After I was a speechwriter, I was then offered another position in the parliament. Then I become the national chairman of the youth movement. And so the snowball started like
rolling.
that. So I never applied for a job in my life.
Well, I mean, we are trying to inspire the students here, of course, and I think they will have to apply for jobs. What would be your advice to them as people go out? Well, I suppose you all still have to do at least 1 year in school, but if not more. But if you do go into the job market, what would you advise people do? So
I think if you can pick up any kind of internships while you're a student, even writing.
As long as it's not mowing the grass.
Yeah. No, that's also fine when you're younger. It's a good experience.
Right.
It makes you appreciate sitting inside writing. At least it did for me. But people are different. It's also great to be. I love to be outdoors. So I'm not saying it. But this also is. What are your aspirations? But I think any kind of things you can do as a student, being part of a student organization, doing internships, writing, everything that can come in addition to a traditional CV, I think is good. That's also something I look at when I see the CVs of young people. It doesn't hurt to have good grades. It doesn't hurt to have good grades
Right.
either.
Were you the number one in school?
No, I told you I was I was very competitive. I have to admit, almost so like I think about it. No, I'm a little bit like, I'm almost a bit embarrassed. But I think it comes with certain personalities. I'm much less competitive today than I used to be when I was younger.
I'm happy I know you now and not then.
Yeah, but competitive in school doesn't mean necessarily negative for the others. You're competitive because you want to do well, but it shouldn't be something negative for others. Right. But to your point, though, I think it's like what good grades shows is that you have the intellectual capacity. So I do look when I see all those CVs, if people have done something else in addition and they're good people. And
you still have to get the grades. Okay, well.
It helps.
I'm glad that at least our audience can still work on that. For me, it's too late, I'm afraid. So
yeah, but you've done well. You've done well. But when I met, I started on law studies.
Right.
So I tell something personal.
Yes, now it gets interesting. We get a story about failure. I was not expecting that.
It's not that. It's not a total failure either. But I started on law studies, and there I met my future wife. That was nice.
That's the greatest success of them all.
Yeah, she became my girlfriend. But then I realized, no, law studies was not for me because it was far too hard work.
Oh, okay.
You had to really, and I had all the other things. I was a speechwriter, I was in the youth movement, and I competed with my future wife, of course. So. Right. She is the senior judge in Norway, so you can just imagine she worked extremely hard, and she did really good, and she did better than me.
Was she the one on the phone saying, also the foreign minister has to listen to the law? Or
she has at least, and that's a different story I can come back to, at least she hasn't brought me into trouble.
Yeah, that's
and some other
that's right,
people, not
political
me,
families.
but political.
And then you end up, you left the law studies and went to do political science.
So my point was then I realized that it was far too hard work to get good grades at the law study. That you really had to work.
See, now we learned something really interesting.
No, you had to work really hard.
Right.
It didn't come easy. So then and you will not like this, then I swapped to economics and business.
There we go.
And there I found out that
I think it's the best study ever.
There I found out that it's more my natural talent, I think, with numbers and all this. So I could really read very hard before the exams and do okay.
Well, I think you scored some points with our audience here in that regard. I want to make sure that we, in the last few minutes of our conversation, that we do allow for some questions from the audience. So if I can have a look, I think there's a mic going around. If you want to raise your hand if you have questions. I've got one there, and I think I'll take a second one and a third one here. So we'll have first the gentleman over there, the lady here, and then the gentleman in white in the back. Oh yeah, if you want, or if you want to go first and pass the microphone. Yeah.
Okay.
You wanna go to the microphone maybe, or?
Okay.
There we go. And you can introduce yourself, maybe something briefly about yourself, ask your question, and then pass on the microphone to the gentleman over there, and then in the back.
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name is Jessica. I'm Chinese-Australian, and I've been here for just over a month now.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you. And my question is, at the AMNC 23 in Tianjin, the World Economic Forum discussed the issues of climate change. It was mentioned that a global approach was planned to uphold global solidarity and multilateralism. So how does your current position align with these objectives? And what long-term practices has the World Economic Forum been working on to mobilize the global community towards these goals?
Right. Fantastic. You one?
Well, hello, Borge. My name is Gael. I'm an exchange student here in Geneva, coming from Mexico. And my question is, which will you describe your biggest challenge in your career? And which were the learnings that you got from, well, as an outcome from that experience?
Excellent. So we had, of course, a question on the AMNC meeting, the meeting in China on climate change.
Been dealing with the impacts of COVID the pandemic. So what lessons have been learned in terms of global preparedness for such crises? And what is the forum's role for improving global resilience?
Thank you.
Okay, so a very good and timely questions. Let me. We can take a few more if you have more time.
The first question, other question was about the climate meeting in China.
Yeah, so it's true that we at this so-called Summer Davos we're focusing also about climate. We were in the middle of in Tianjin in June, July. We were also in the middle of a heat wave.
Oh wow!
So
yeah.
it was really hot there, and it was a reminder of the cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of action, as I mentioned also earlier. The problem with CO2 gases and climate gases is that it travels without the passport. So regardless of where it comes, it affects all of us. And what was very interesting is also that China is taking several steps now to also introduce renewables. It's, I think, 80% of the new capacity on solar is being installed in China, but still coal plays also a major role in China's energy production. There is 8,500 coal-fired power plants in the world. And, you know, coal emits double as much of CO2 as like a gas-fired power plant. And brown coal is the most emitting of all of the fuels. Then there was another question.
Yeah, sorry, we had two more questions. So one from the gentleman there from the exchange student from Mexico. What's your name again? Gael. And you asked basically about experiences. Maybe you can repeat, and then we can also still hear again from a gentleman in the back that we had as well. Yeah. We'll wait for the microphone again. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Well, thanks. Like, in name of our classmates as well, I'd like to thank for your assistance here and sharing your knowledge with us. And what I wanted to ask you is could you tell us which was your challenge professionally? And yeah, which were the outcomes or learnings that you had from that experience? Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the final question was on COVID and some of the learnings
from
COVID.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me. So on the COVID piece, I'll come to yours too. That have to reflect a little bit more on that. The question is not so easy to pick one thing. But on COVID, I think that was another reminder of that we are all on the same planet. In the sense that, as I said, with climate change, CO2 travels without a passport. The same is with also pandemics and also future pandemics. We really need to have a global approach. There's not like saying, oh, we are good at being prepared for future pandemics in our country. And if others are not, it really doesn't matter. And this is what is lacking in today's world, this common approach to common challenges. There are local challenges that you can deal with in your community or on your level, but if they are global, you need to deal with them at the global level, and you have to collaborate at the global level. And that is unfortunately missing. So I would say if we want to have a good preparedness for also future pandemics, we have to work together and also together try to be better prepared. Without that, we are going to see new pandemics in the future, and we will potentially end up in the similar kind of crisis as we did. If there was a new pandemic now, we may be a little bit better prepared. Maybe we have more masks. Maybe we know that we can produce vaccines faster. But I think we would see a lot of the, unfortunately, same mechanisms.
That's I suppose, more of a glass half empty. I mean, like you had a front row seat to, of course, what happened in COVID, and I was there with you. I was at first, encouraged to see that so many people had goodwill. You saw these companies sort of like change their production sites to make, masks and alcohol and all of these things. But so you say the long-term effect that you've seen is not necessarily a better preparedness overall, globally, even if there has been, encouraging evolutions on a corporate level, perhaps.
No, I think that's unfortunately a fair conclusion.
Yeah. Then we had the last question. Now you can't escape it anymore. Of course, your advice for Gael. What are some of the takeaways? What are the advices that you can give to Gael, who's joining us from Mexico?
Yeah. So was it advice or crisis that I saw in my career and how I handled them?
Yeah,
it was the latter, was it?
And how you overcame them, I suppose.
Yeah. So that's what the question is. No. As you all know, as students, you can write a good report on an exam, but if it's not answering the question, they flunk you. So I just wanted to make sure that I was serious about what the question is. So what are challenges and crises that I overcame in my career, and what I learned from it. So, when I became and I'll deal with it in a professional context. I think that's of more interest both for you guys and also for myself, to put it that way. So, I became a young Minister of Climate and Environment more than 20 years ago in my home country. I was the youngest minister in the cabinet, and I just realized that there were not that many friends in the cabinet of the Minister of Environment. So when I wanted to do something for the environment, I either had the fishery ministry against me,
opposed,
or the agriculture minister, or I had the trade and industry minister, or I had the finance minister that didn't like using money on it, or I had then the oil and energy minister against what I was proposing. And in the beginning, I thought this was like really challenging. I don't think I was mentally prepared for how tough it was, like really, really tough. And the civil servants, also backing those different ministries were also really tough with the ministers, and they stood up for their views. But I still was of the opinion that we needed to take pollution of our ocean more seriously. We had to have a sustainable management of our fishery stocks. Agriculture is important, but they didn't need to pollute as much as they did. And if we did, for example, logging. We could also do logging in areas where we didn't have the most oldest and most biodiverse forest. I also wanted to protect some of the wilderness as national parks.
So, everybody supports you except for your members of the cabinet.
Yeah, but they're strong. No, but they're strong lobby
Interest
groups behind it. I tell you, you know, you don't want to fight a Norwegian farmer or a fisherman like that. So I realized then in the beginning, and this was, you can say, was it a crisis? Yeah, I felt it was like really tough to manage all this complexity of strong pushbacks. But I still, especially when I wanted to do so much, I was like, you know, young and ambitious on this. But then I realized that I had to make alliances. I got much sure about things. So I made alliances with the prime minister. Then I made alliances with people in the parliament that ask questions. I used the media to then create the momentum for some of these things. So the crisis was also probably the biggest learning process for me about real politics. Real politics is tough, but you have to also, as long as it's ethical, you also have to, since it's no Sunday school, you also have to use the necessary tools to try to achieve what you believe in. And I think for the result, we doubled the area of national parks in Norway in 3 years. Protestings from farmers, from business and all this. But no, when these are protected as national parks, I don't hear anyone saying, oh, that environment minister that established all those national parks, that was like a big mistake 20 years ago. No, everyone is happy about it now. So I think in careers, you also have to be, in every career, I think you will meet challenges. I have had no jobs, and probably not you, Peter, or others, where there's no challenges. Every job comes with challenges. There's always someone that wants something else, or you have to fight for it, and all this. But this taught me to be tough enough to get things done that I believed in. So for me, it was the biggest learning. Those 3-4 years were the biggest learning process in my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I think I became much tougher after that, but in a good way. If I believe in something, if I want to get something done, I think it's the right thing, then I'm on it. And that I learned from that process. You have to but always you have to then stick to corporate governance and be ethical, you know, and be transparent about it. And I also learned, I have to say, that I addressed it directly with these guys. I remember...
And now they respect you, maybe?
That I don't know. I'm not... Maybe some, maybe some not. But I also learned, but these different cultures. I remember they were planning, we had like a party congress. And I had said that we should apply some international standards for our oceans in Norway. Not uncomplicated, my proposal, though, I have to say. It wasn't, because it could have implications for the fisheries, maybe even for the oil and gas exploration. So it was quite ambitious. So today I probably wouldn't have launched
Simplify it a bit.
Yeah, but I said we should so, and of course they got very upset. So I then heard through my friends that were on my team, the young people in the party said, oh, they're planning now a resolution going against you at the party meeting.
Well, you clearly survived.
Yeah, but then I thought, what to do? So I just took them together after a cabinet meeting. I said, can I have a few words with you guys? And I said, isn't it a little bit like coming up with this at the party congress, like two cabinet ministers, we are colleagues, trying to, that's a little bit over the top, you know. I don't think you would have appreciated if I did that in your aerators. I think you just stop that, but I'm willing to discuss my proposal to see how we can align it. But
the realpolitik in action.
Yeah, because it was a bit ambitious. And then there was no
No problem.
Yeah, it fizzled out. So it's like, but then also be ready to raise it with someone like that, face to face. They're very embarrassed. They're very embarrassed by it. They didn't think I was like able to sniff it happening, but I did sniff it, and I raised it with them, and I think that's for me one of the learnings. Sometimes it's good to raise it too, like straight in people's but in a nice way.
I guess that is the Norwegian in you. Say it like it is.
Or the Flemish.
Yes, the Dutch, maybe that would be where we find common ground. Well, listen, we've, I see that your glass is empty, but I think that for us, for most people in the audience, our glass is full. We've really been inspired by everything that you've shared with us. And I want to thank you for taking the time, all of this time, to spend with us, to be so thoughtful about all the topics we discussed. And of course, to be our keynote speaker to kick off this amazing academic year with EU Business School and Learning for Leaders. Børge, on behalf of everyone, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for coming.
That's great. Thank you.